So, is a virtual recital really as good as an in-person one? My answer may surprise you, and that's because it's actually the wrong question to be asking. So today we're going to go over what is the right question to ask when it comes to comparing a virtual recital to an in-person recital. But first you have to know what the actual question is. So instead of asking, is a virtual recital better than or as good as an in-person recital, we really need to look at what are the distinct advantages of each in their own right. Because the fact of the matter is, it's kind of comparing apples to oranges. Sure, they both involve a group of students presenting their carefully practiced and prepared music to a group of people. But they really are very different animals. And so instead of asking, is this one really as good as this one? We're gonna cover the actual advantages that a virtual recital has that an in-person recital does not. For my purposes, I'm actually not gonna go through the different kinds of virtual recitals today because that actually could mean a couple different things. The advantage of living in the digital age is that there are a lot of different technological solutions to problems that come up with things like all of a sudden you can't have in-person events anymore. And there are 3 different types of recitals that have kind of manifested themselves as a result of this super fun Twilight Zone year that we are all experiencing. So there are virtual recitals that are in a completely live stream type of format, such as a Zoom recital where all the students are performing remotely live on Zoom. There's the pre-recorded format where all of the performances are recorded in advance and then compiled and presented in either a format like YouTube or Facebook. And then there's sort of a hybrid option that includes some live elements and some pre-recorded elements. And Nicola Canton has a great video going through kind of the pros and cons of each of those 3 types of virtual recitals. So if that is something that you're kind of trying to make a decision about, I highly recommend checking out the link at the top of the screen. But I've chosen to go with the pre-recorded format, again, for several reasons that I won't get into here, but ultimately because I feel like it serves what I'm looking for the best. Okay, so back to our reframing. Instead of, is a virtual recital really as good as an in-person recital, what we should be looking at are all the advantages to a virtual recital that we don't get in an in-person recital. Now, they each have a lot of advantages and, of course, disadvantages. There's no one perfect scenario that really meets every single need of every single performer. But since we don't have the option right now of doing in-person recitals, I think it is definitely worth looking at all of the great things that can come out of doing a virtual recital for students. And because I'm a big fan of alliteration, I am going to give you my 5 advantages that all start with the letter A for virtual recitals. Here we go. The first advantage has to do with your audience. Now, obviously, we are used to the format of a live event, right? Where you are inviting people, and if you want to be a part of it or even participate, you have to physically show up and be at the recital at the right time, on the right day, in the right place. However, if you are unable to make it there, you miss out. And you're kind of stuck with just watching a replay or a recorded video that a parent or other family member has taken of the performance after the fact. So with a virtual recital, we essentially eliminate that problem. If you have a conflict with scheduling and you wouldn't normally be able to show up physically in person, this alleviates it. You can now show up virtually by tuning in from wherever you are, or if you are occupied in some sort of meeting or other commitment, you can watch it later and still have largely the same experience as if you had watched during the live premiere. If you have friends or family who would love to be part of the recital but live out of state and wouldn't be able to easily travel to make it to an in-person recital, problem solved. Now they can tune in from their homes wherever they are and experience the recital live with everyone else, which they wouldn't normally be able to do if it was in person. If you happen to get sick and you would normally have to stay home, you can still experience the recital. If you have concerns about being in large crowds or in public in a large group of people, especially nowadays, again, you can still be part of it this way. And if you happen to live in a family with multiple small children who do not normally like to sit still and be quiet for an extended period of time, you don't have to worry about it anymore. You don't have to bring distractions and try to bribe them or whatever else you would normally have to do in this type of circumstance. You get a pass. They can just run around in the house and do whatever they want because you can still enjoy and experience the recital no matter what they're doing. All within the realm of reason, of course. Can you tell I don't have small children? I don't. Okay. So anyway, the audience factor is a huge advantage to me with a virtual recital that we don't get with an in-person recital. We have so many ways to increase the audience and to really make it a wonderful experience for all of those involved in ways that we wouldn't normally be able to do in person. Advantage number 2 is accessibility. Normally, if we were doing an in-person performance, each family would probably want to record their child's piece, or if you're an older student, having a friend or another family member recording your performance, so that way you have a keepsake, you can go back and watch it later, or you can share it with people who weren't able to be part of the performance live with you on that day. But what about the pieces that you didn't know were coming that you would love to be able to revisit? Chances are, if you're not super familiar with what to expect from a certain student or anticipating which song you might really enjoy and want to be able to hear again, you won't know until it's too late that you wish you were recording somebody else's piece. With a virtual recital, you really don't have to worry about that. You'll not only get an excellent recording that's kind of free of a lot of the typical live venue extra noises, right? You won't hear coughing or people shuffling around or unexpected interruptions or distractions. You'll have a very clear recording of either your own pieces or your child's pieces. But on top of that, you'll also get that same quality of recording for everybody else's pieces too. So if a certain performer has a voice that you just love, you can go back and listen to their entire piece again. If somebody plays a piece that you've never heard before, but you would like to do it in the future, you can totally reference it, and it is easily accessible whenever you would like it. It's also very easy to share your own performance with whoever else you'd like to share it with. Now, of course, if we were doing it live, you could still film your own performances and share them with your friends and family. But this way, everything is all in one place, and you don't have to worry about having to kind of sit through every single performance to get to your own couple minutes out of the entire recital, because there are timestamps added after the live premiere. So it's easy to just find the performance you want, click, and there you are. Okay, advantage number 3 has to do with one of everyone's least favorite topics, which is anxiety. So whenever we are preparing for any kind of live performance, we usually spend time talking about how to deal with any symptoms of performance anxiety, whether it's just a little bit of nervous energy or butterflies in your stomach to more severe performance anxiety like not being able to get through your piece. And we usually go over different anxiety management strategies because the truth is you very rarely will completely overcome and eliminate all of your performance anxiety. And actually, we really don't even want it to go away completely, because a lot of the time, if you work on being able to channel that energy into your performance, it brings your performance more to life. It enables a lot more expression and vitality to come through in your pieces. And it also means that the performance means something to you. It's really boring to watch somebody perform some kind of music when they obviously don't really care about it and they're rather bored with it themselves. And your audience will have so much more of a connection to your piece if they can tell and feel that it means something to you. So instead of eliminating anxiety and the symptoms that come along with performance anxiety, we really want to focus on how we can channel the energy into the performance itself. Now, The great thing about a virtual recital that we don't get with an in-person recital is it's sort of a stepping stone. It's a little bit less pressure than being suddenly on stage live in the moment in front of a large audience, but you still experience a lot of the same physiological responses as if you are performing in front of a live audience. The funny thing is, your brain still interprets being filmed as being watched, which often is the biggest trigger for those having to do with performance anxiety. They feel, oh my gosh, I'm being watched, and your brain initiates that anxiety fight or flight response, right? Being filmed in an environment where you're already familiar with it, it feels safe, and you can do multiple takes of your piece if you want. It really takes a lot of the edge off for those who have more severe anxiety symptoms. Plus, if you haven't worked your way up to doing a live performance yet, or you haven't felt ready for it, this is really good practice with performing under pressure, which means when you actually do prepare to perform live, you're going to have a little bit of experience with dealing with all of those symptoms. Performance is one more thing where it really improves the more that you practice doing it. So if you have trouble performing under pressure, the more you can put yourself in a situation where you have to practice performing under pressure, the easier it's going to be to adjust to it because you've practiced doing it. You've done it before. And a lot of the time, a huge challenge with performing and dealing with performance anxiety is just the mental adjustment. If a virtual recital or two can help you become more comfortable with the idea of performing, that's a win to me. Okay, advantage number 4. So this has to do with the idea of affirmation, particularly around the expectation of affirmation. And over the years, when I've talked to students about the idea of participating in a live event, those who have a hard time with the idea of affirmation usually say one of two things. So I usually hear from younger students that they are not wanting to perform because if they get anxious and if they make a mistake, there is somebody that they know who maybe is a little bit more on the critical side who will pinpoint it, and that's all that they will see. And they will immediately point it out, and it won't be about the student's accomplishment or their growth and their progress. It'll just be about the flaw. And from older students, what I tend to hear is that they are concerned that if they have any sort of interruption because of nervousness, or if they make any kind of mistake, or because they're just starting out as an adult, that they're not going to be meeting the audience's expectations, and the audience will be bored or disappointed or just kind of have to suffer through their performance. And so on the one hand, some people are really concerned about dealing with a lack of affirmation from people that they know. On the other hand, it's the complete opposite, right? Dealing with not only a lack of affirmation, but this infliction of suffering upon this large group of people that don't know you and aren't there for you necessarily. And what's really highlighted in this is the idea that in order for a performance to be valuable, it must be perfect. I don't like to use the word hate very often, but I really hate associating the word perfect with a performance, because even professional musicians do not strictly have perfect performances. And it doesn't mean that the performance wasn't great or wasn't moving or wasn't exactly what somebody needed to experience right at that moment. And this is what I feel like is the danger with using the word perfect or striving for perfection in your performance. A lot of the time, if you are focused on perfection, you are completely setting yourself up to be disappointed, because one tiny mistake means you were not perfect. And it actually tends to lead to a worse performance for a lot of people, because they're so hyper-focused on technical accuracy that you lose a lot of the beauty and the expression and the human nature of what it means to perform live music in your piece. In the same way that you want to have a little bit of extra energy when you perform, because if you don't, it's just kind of bland and boring. Well, if you don't have any type of real expression in your piece either, because you're so focused on just getting all the notes and the timing right, is it really what we want for our music? And in my opinion, it's not. Now, there are some people who really have a hard time with this idea, and I'm not saying that you should never try and get your pieces right. Of course, I feel like I should probably clarify that in there too. However, it is much better to strive for excellence than perfection. And that is what I really try and encourage when it comes to preparing for live performances. So back to this idea of affirmation. When it comes to feeling like either someone you know or someone you don't know is going to have a negative experience because of how you performed your piece, what it really boils down to a lot of the time is fear of not being perfect. And once we take this idea of being perfect out of the equation, we really free ourselves up to actually enjoy performing. What a concept, right? And so this is where the virtual recital really steps in my opinion, because if you struggle with feeling like you're going to let down your audience in some capacity if something is not entirely perfect, the virtual recital actually provides you with a format that can really alleviate that fear. Because guess what? You can perform your piece as many times as you need to get a take that you feel comfortable with. And when we experience the live premiere all together and you're with your family, or you know that a bunch of other people are watching your performances, you know what to expect. So it takes that fear of, oh my gosh, what happens in the moment when I'm under pressure and I'm in front of all these people? That goes away, right? You know what your performance is already going to be. So you don't have to sit there in fear that you're going to somehow disappoint your audience, because you already have something that you're really happy with. What I also love about the virtual recital format when it comes to affirmation is it actually provides even more of an advantage for us to encourage each other. And here's why. In a live performance setting, let's say you recognize somebody from one of your workshops, or someone you've done a duet with before, or just somebody that you don't really know in person, but you really liked their piece. It's generally frowned upon to get up out of your seat and walk over to where they're sitting after they finish their piece and start explaining to them loudly how much you really loved their performance in the middle of someone else's performance in the recital. That is not good. So what I love about the virtual recital is we have a constant opportunity to congratulate our fellow students, to encourage them, to applaud their performances, not literally this time, but with our compliments, and to let them know how much we loved their pieces. Most of the time, students never end up knowing how much somebody enjoyed their piece, how much the audience as a collective enjoyed their performance. And that's really a shame, because you can end up feeling like you just didn't really matter as much as you did. And a lot of the time, if we can't get to everybody at the end of an in-person performance, we might miss some people that we really wanted to say good job to. And some people are on the shy side, and it may not be very easy for them to walk up to somebody they don't know at all or don't know very well and talk about how much they loved their performance. Plus, a lot of us forget things. And so by the end of a 90-minute recital, many of us are just like, whoo, time for a breath of fresh air. That was great, but let's go, you know? And so with a virtual recital, what I really, really love is that not only is it okay to actually give our compliments to each other while the performances are still going on, but we have just a constant opportunity to encourage each other and explain all of the things that we really loved that we might not otherwise have said to them. So you're probably going to leave a virtual recital feeling much better about your performances than an in-person recital, just from the sheer amount of ability of everybody to comment on what they loved about your pieces. It is so important and so valuable for students to look for things they like in other performers, because eventually that creates more of a reflection back on how they evaluate themselves. It's just another thing that we can practice getting better at, treating our own performances with a positive outlook. As many of us know, we would never say certain things to others that we sometimes say to ourselves. And so it's a great opportunity to not only encourage other people, but to work on that skill for yourself. And that brings us to advantage number 5. And this is kind of a very unique to this year advantage. Now, granted, all of the need for moving much of our lives online has been unique to this year. But when it comes to the virtual recital, I feel like it is an excellent way for us to add something to our lives when so many of us have experienced loss in one way or another through this year. The entertainment industry alone has taken an enormous hit with all of the complications of the pandemic. And really, that's why we're having this discussion in the first place, right? Virtual recital versus in-person recital. Well, if the in-person option is no longer an option, then you're down to virtual recital or no recital at all. And in a season where so many of us have really acutely felt the loss of things that we took for granted, I think sharing your musical growth and your progress and being involved together with a community of people who are supportive and encouraging to each other is not something that should be another loss. So whether or not you feel like a virtual recital could really be as good as an in-person recital, I think that the benefits far outweigh any of the disadvantages, and it's definitely worth it to me for us to be able to add value in this way to our community, to experience with each other artistry and beauty and connection through our music. And I think it's definitely something that is worth taking advantage of during this year. So, I hope that if you are interested in checking out our next studio recital, you will join us on the morning of Halloween, October 31st at 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for our live premiere of the Trupiano Studios Halloween Virtual Recital. That's a mouthful. Of course, you can always check out the replay after the live premiere, but either way, the link will be right below in the description. Hope to see you there, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.